it has changed my life. like my happiness, my stress level. It is not stressful, that's for sure. It's stressful to be working for yourself. And, when you're in a school, yes, it's a lot of work and it's very stressful, but it's predictable, like every 2 weeks you got your paycheck.
I think the thing that inspired me to start this podcast for teachers who may be thinking of doing the same thing, right? To understand that, hey, it's not all roses. Like it is, there's a lot of emotions behind it in terms of the online teaching. And it was just extremely difficult and put on everybody immediately. And it was just sink or swim. You have to figure it out.
Yeah.
Right? So I understand parents' hesitation when it comes to the online, and something that, it's something that I feel as though when I started this out, and maybe for you as well, we questioned, is this going to be viable for the students?
I knew that eventually I would leave the classroom because I felt that it was not necessarily sustainable to work all day and have a family of my own. So I knew there would be some transition. I feel like I was gradually trying to make my life a little bit easier in order to stay in education.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Traveling Teacher Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Panopoulos, and today we have a very special guest. Stephanie Willis is a former elementary classroom teacher, reading interventionist, and district literacy coach from New Jersey. Stephanie started her teaching career in 2011 and served the public school system for 11 years, ending this chapter of her life and career in June 2022. Stephanie's transition began by working as a contracted instructional designer for Panorama Education while she built her current business, the Literacy Party Tutoring Company. Stephanie is currently the owner and also a tutor for her company. Her and her team serve students pre-K through 12th grade. Outside of her job, Stephanie enjoys spending time with her pup Maple, trying new restaurants, and traveling the world. Stephanie, definitely lots of commonalities there on that last piece. I know we talk a lot about Miami and traveling in general. So yeah, thank you so much for being a guest on the Traveling Teacher Podcast.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to
Stephanie,
chat.
Yeah, when I started doing online tutoring, what I would do, because I was so curious about starting my own business and trying to figure out how to really make this work. And so I would go onto these private Facebook groups, and anybody who kind of seemed to know what they were talking about, I would just private message them and say, hey, what is one piece of advice that you would give to somebody who's trying to start something out? And of all of the ones that I got, you were the first one to actually tell me, hey, I think it's really time for you to take the leap. I took the leap a few months back and things have worked out really, really well. And since then, I mean, you've helped me a bunch of times and it's been really nice communicating back and forth and just kind of seeing this edupreneur thing shine. And so, I wanted to thank you for that. That was really a big necessary push that ultimately got me to where I am, but also got me to start the podcast here to help teachers who may want to do the same thing. So thank you for that. That is really great.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad. I love nothing more than helping other teachers find a passion out of teaching that, still kind of involves a lot of the same, like children, teaching, learning. Yeah, I love nothing more than helping teachers kind of get out of the public education system, but still stay true to what they really love to do. So I'm very glad everything has worked out so well for you as well.
For sure. And likewise for you, it's been really cool seeing your company grow as well. And yeah, I mean, it's really a new chapter for a lot of teachers and a lot of questions for teachers. And, hearing these kinds of stories are really fun. But Stephanie, where did this all start for you? When did you know you wanted to become a teacher?
So I come from a long line of teachers, which I think is common. My mom is a teacher. My grandmothers were teachers. My sister even ended up being in the education field for a little while. But I was the little girl who lined up my stuffed animals and taught them their ABCs at a very young age in our attic. I, would take all my mom's school supplies that she had and just made my own classroom. So I kind of was always a teacher, just like it was kind of just innate. And I went to college being like, I'm not going to be a teacher because I'm not going to do what my mom did and what everyone did. And then, found myself in education and loving every minute of like the coursework in college. And then, 4 years later, I was in a classroom of my own. So it kind of, happened without, I knew I wanted to be a teacher, but, resisted it a little bit, I guess.
For sure. It's so interesting. I really think that, for children, the thoughts that we have of what we want to become when we get older really tend to kind of shine back at some point in our lives. And it's really cool to be able to say that you actually fulfilled that, right? That you, even from a little kid, teaching the teddy bears in the attic and all of that, and just seeing your past generations do it as well. It's just really cool that you went on with this. So when you went into college, what did you major in education? Did you have other kinds of majors as well?
So I started in speech therapy, like a communication sciences and disorders program. That was what my sister was there doing. And she ended up being in the schools for a little while as well. So I started with that, and then just kind of, started doing that coursework. And there's a lot of carryover from one to the other, like, with the language development and even just like being in a school. But I realized that I wanted my own classroom, my own students, and then I wouldn't really get that as a speech therapist. It would be, one or two kids at a time in a pull-out model. And I was like, I want to decorate a classroom and do arts and crafts. And, that was not really possible as a speech therapist. So I switched.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. And did you do any kind of substitute teaching or anything like that to try to figure out what grades you wanted to teach? Or were you just kind of, you already knew?
I knew I wanted to be able to do like many different subjects. Like I knew I wanted to like teach all the subjects. So elementary was the right fit for me. I also wanted to be able to do like a little bit of art and like nature and kind of get more of the whole child. So it was always pretty clear. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's I give a lot of credit to the elementary teachers. I tried it for a couple of days when I was substitute teaching, trying to figure out which grades I wanted to do. And I'll be honest, it was a lot of boogers and a lot of tears, and it was just something that, I felt the better to give to the professionals of that age group. So yeah, lots of props for doing that. Now, within the elementary schools, what grades did you teach?
Yeah, so I started I taught first grade, second grade, third grade. I was also a district literacy coach. And then I also taught preschool through fifth grade as a literacy and media specialist. So I kind of worked with all ages when I was there. So
it's incredible.
Most
so you have
of my
a pretty
time,
well-rounded...
I was a first grade teacher.
So you taught kindergarten through fifth grade in all different capacities. Do you have a favorite grade that you taught, or...
Yeah, so that's a great question. I loved first grade primarily because I was able to teach reading. That's actually why I started to kind of focus on reading intervention type work and more so focusing on literacy. Yeah, I would say first grade and specifically reading.
How many years did you actually teach in the classroom, Stephanie?
So I was a classroom teacher for 8 years. And then my last 3 years in education, I was a district literacy coach and media specialist. So I taught library classes and supported teachers and also did reading intervention. It was 3 years during the pandemic were my last year. So it was kind of do whatever. My position was, not a classroom teacher. So it was easy to kind of push me in a lot of different ways. So yeah, during that time, it was like jack of all trades.
Tell us a little bit about when you were in the classroom. You mentioned you wanted to be able to do all the subjects. You wanted to be able to do a little bit of art and a little bit of everything, decorating the room and stuff like that. Talk to us a little bit about your classroom and, maybe something that one of the things that you enjoyed the most about teaching in a classroom.
That's a great question. And I kind of said this, I loved teaching reading, most specifically reading picture books to kids. And kind of extending them in some way, shape, or form. So connecting them to either, science or social studies or, math. But then, I know I like arts and crafts. It's so elementary of me. But doing something to kind of extend it, like going outside and seeing if we can find the things that were in our book, or doing a craft that we could put up on our bulletin board, or anything to kind of take it to the next level. Like, we read books about like butterflies, and then we were pretending to be butterflies by drinking, juice out of a straw, like a proboscis. Like, just kind of making the reading aspect come to life was probably my favorite thing to do in the classroom.
That's so interesting. And I really, love hearing that. It's something that I feel as though, I mean, yes, it is so elementary of you. However, it's so awesome, right? Like, that is what teachers need in that age group. And that's what the students need. Right. And so you putting this creativity and all of these different, things into your teaching, I'm sure you got a lot of smiles from it. And, it must be so nice to see the kids all excited doing stuff like that, right? Like sipping from the juice or doing the arts and crafts and all of that stuff. So, talk to us a little bit about, how was your classroom set up? Would you do small group tables? Was it all kind of lined up desks? How was that?
So I always was a big proponent for tables, and always had tables when I was in a first grade classroom. Actually, you know what? I think I only ever had tables, even in second and third grade as well. I liked the community that tables created, the fact that kids had to like share materials and, organize their spaces and work together, like collaboratively, a little bit more than if they have their own desk. So I always had tables. I did a lot of small group work though too. Like I didn't have a desk, but I did have like a kidney shaped table in my classroom. So we followed the workshop model pretty much for all subjects. So that was like a mini lesson taught, whole group, and then like some coaching during independent working time. So I always either was doing like conferences at a table with individual students, or bringing, a group to my table for whether it was like guided reading or guided math. So yeah, definitely some whole group, a lot of like small group, and even just a lot of like one-on-one as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's so cool to have the group tables and develop that kind of community within the classroom, because as they get older, that group setting starts to go away, right? Like, even in the middle school, yes, we definitely did less group work. We still did some kind of to the elementary, but when you get into high school, it's really kind of non-existent for most classes, I would say. So it's definitely cool to at least start them off with that and build that community. And I don't know if you agree, but for me, I always say, I think that 50% of teaching in general, no matter what grade level you're in, is also teaching kids how to be people, right? How their social emotional understandings, and really taking the time to stop a lesson if necessary and share something with them that you may have observed. And, it's definitely something that takes a special kind of person, especially for elementary and middle schools. But it's just so rewarding when you see them grow in that sense, from the beginning to the end of the year, and even when they come back to you in years later on. How many districts did you teach in? Was it just one?
Two. So I taught in a school district in New Jersey, in Westfield, New Jersey, for 8 years. And then I was in a district a little bit closer to home for the last 3, Parsippany. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Did you notice any I know that your roles were a little bit different, but did you notice any kind of differences between the districts that kind of stood out to you?
Yeah. Well, so they were slightly different demographics, which I think, there was a lot of different challenges in either school. Different resources in one district to the other, and like accessibility to resources, or access to resources, I guess. So one of the schools I felt was a little bit more behind in, having resources and the research to kind of support, the new ways of doing things. So that was interesting. And I think that's, I did a lot there to help, the teachers, so that, because I came from a school with a little bit more resources. And so a lot of the programs that I taught in my previous district were just starting to come to my new district. So I helped some teachers with that, kind of like learning about the new curriculums and implementing it into their classrooms. So
anytime I talk with teachers or people who want to become teachers, I always say, I think it's really nice. I think it's really nice to be able to go to at least a couple of different districts within your teaching career so you can see the differences, especially when it comes to something like you are doing now, where anybody may potentially be transitioning out of the classroom, gives you a really well-rounded understanding of education as a whole. And yet I also respect the people who stay within one district for 30, 40 years, because you really become a pillar of the community, right? You teach, students and then their kids, and you really form relationships with the community as a whole. So there's really no right or wrong way of doing it. For me personally, I definitely enjoyed bouncing around to different districts to kind of understand the different pieces. And it sounds like you gathered some pretty good intel from your first one to bring it into your second district. So that's really awesome.
Yeah, that was nice.
Do you recall, I'm going to bounce back a little bit. Do you recall any teachers that really stood out to you in your own K-12 career as a student that really kind of solidified something in you, whether it was during that time or afterwards, about becoming a teacher?
That's a good question too. I feel like my favorite role models as teachers were the ones in my family. I have a few like elementary teachers that I loved. I felt like learning was really tough in middle school and high school for me. So I kind of feel like I went into education with the, I want to be able to help students that, needed help. Let me think. And kind of like I felt like I didn't maybe get the best education in middle school and high school. And that was kind of more so one of the reasons than it being like one specific teacher that I was like, I want to be just like so and so. I will say once I got to college, I felt like my teachers there were incredible. So I don't know. I feel like there was maybe a little bit of a gap, and that was more the reason why I wanted to like be a teacher, was to kind of help the kids that I felt like, maybe needed extra support between middle and high school. You would think I would be a middle and high school teacher, but I'm not. I do remember substitute teaching after a few years of college and visiting this woman. She would have no idea who I am. I was just a substitute teacher. Her name was Mrs. Licata. She was a first grade teacher in Basking Ridge. And she was like the teacher. I think like a parrot in her classroom for like a week. She was unbelievable. She was singing and dancing and fun. The amount of like, these kids looked at her with like in awe of her. So I remember wanting to be just like Mrs. Licata, as a teacher. I will never kind of forget being in her room. So
that's amazing. Your desire to be there for the kids that needed help and all of that is great. And I will say, even as an elementary teacher for you and me as a former middle school teacher, I was always in awe of I don't want to say, I guess, training of students on how to be respectful from their elementary teachers, because I remember countless times my first couple of years teaching when I just trashed the lesson. It was just not what I was expecting it to be. And no matter what, the kids would always be walking out saying thank you. They would always come in saying hi. And that's just something that is completely due to elementary teachers and really showing these students like, hey, these are important things for even adults to hear and feel and be a part of. And again, it points back to that social emotional piece of being a human. So, I feel as though the work as yourself as a former elementary teacher, it really kind of carries through with these kids all the way through high school, into college, and into life in general, right? So you and all the elementary teachers have definitely made an impact, moving into it. Even for them in the future. What was your least favorite part of the classroom? Did you have a least favorite part?
Least favorite thing to teach, or
I would say least favorite part of the maybe being a part of a school district,
Mhm.
or any, I guess, in terms of that sense.
Yeah, okay. I think the hardest part as a teacher is knowing how much support a student, couple of students need, and then getting them the support they need, they deserve quickly, or even just getting it necessarily at all. There's so many schools that with like limited resources or funding budget, like low budgets, and like these kids so well, you put everything you have into it, and at the end of the day it's not enough, and like but what it could be, and it's like it's just so it's frustrating, and just there's just never going to be enough to help some of these kids. So I think that's the
I
hardest part of the
agree.
teacher.
For sure. I think education, in an ideal world, we could separate money and education and everything would just be, perfect in a sense. But we have to look at it as a business. And I totally agree. And I think a lot of teachers agree as well who are listening. It can be tough and frustrating to see the things that may need to be done that there's simply no funding for, or whatever the case may be. And at the same time, I feel as though, I don't know about you, but for me, it really was kind of a factor into me wanting to transition into something different and not leaving education as a whole. And again, I'm not throwing any shade on any school districts or anything like that, because everybody's doing the best they can, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and and funding goes from the bottom all the way to the top, and I feel as though it's an issue all the way throughout, right? So
Yeah.
it's nobody's specific fault. And yet, I feel as though these types of adversities and frustrations and feeling these emotions that people like you and I and many other teachers may feel about what you were just talking about kind of gives this new door of, well, is there anything else out there, right?
Mhm.
Is there a way that I can implement my passion for education outside of the classroom and still be able to do the things that I love, right? And so
Yeah.
I would say, talk to us a little bit about your kind of thoughts when it came to transitioning into this what was back then new, the Literacy Party Tutoring Company. What were some factors that pushed you into deciding to try something like this?
Sure. So, I mean, that kind of transitions well too. One of the biggest reasons why I ended up leaving public education was because I felt like I couldn't confidently say that, and again, to no fault of these districts, that we couldn't do what was best for all of our kids. And that's why I was there, is to do what is best for kids. And I just came up against a lot of roadblocks in doing that. And now what I do is what is best for kids, or what I believe is what is best for kids. And I work with the kids that I felt like I couldn't help in school due to whatever that may be. So at the Literacy Party, I personally tutor pretty much mostly preschool through second grade reading. And, not everybody gets the reading support they need at school. So that's what I try to do outside of public education now.
It's tough. A lot of kids don't get exactly what they need in the classrooms, and the large class sizes and all of that. It's kind of impossible to do so, and yet it's nice that people like yourself have these external pieces that they can kind of supplement whatever each individual student may need. Um, how tough was it for you to actually leave the classroom? What was your thought process back then about taking the leap before you did and then after you took the leap?
I never saw myself like ever leaving the classroom. I knew that eventually I would leave the classroom because I felt that it was not necessarily sustainable to work all day and have a family of my own. So I knew there would be some transition. I feel like I was gradually trying to like make my life a little bit easier in order to stay in education. So that's why I shifted from the classroom to kind of like a specialist position. And then, I saw my sister, who is a speech therapist, who was in the schools, transition to a private practice. So she went more and more part-time as she built her clients up in her speech therapy practice. And she was all remote. And I was like, wow. So she works from home. She works with kids pretty much the same ages as I do online. And I was like, if she can do this, I can do this, and just do my specialty. So she was really the model for, the business model that I wanted to do. And I just saw her living this life that I was like, really wanted to be able to be home, to be able to have a flexibility. So she did that about a year before I did. So she started transitioning out, I guess, winter of 2021. And then I kind of saw that and I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to figure this out. And I used my last school year as like, so I was like, by the end of this school year, I need to also be doing that as well. So I felt like I had a lot of motivation. I had a great model. It can definitely be scary and daunting to kind of leave. Especially something that you feel like you were like kind of like destined to do it. And the change is definitely scary. Yeah. So it was definitely scary. It was definitely sad. I think if I hadn't transitioned from my district I was in for 8 years and then been in a place kind of like only during the pandemic for 3 years, it would have been even harder just because I didn't build the community and the relationships and as I had prior. So I'd already kind of like ripped that Band-Aid off. So then it was a little easier to leave this school, the next one. Yeah, but I wouldn't look back either at the same time. It was hard. I mean, when I told my principal, I was in tears, but so excited at the same time. So it was just a lot of mixed emotions.
I think the thing that inspired me to start this podcast for teachers who may be thinking of doing the same thing, right? To understand that, hey, it's not all roses. Like it is, there's a lot of emotions behind it, especially leaving the students in the classroom and saying, I like what you said, like, I'm going to figure this out. I have to figure this out. And, I feel as though everybody has somebody that they can chat with about, taking a leap like you did with your sister. And how did the conversations go in terms of, because you mentioned that your mother was a teacher, your grandmothers were teachers. Did you speak with any of them about this transition, and what were their kind of thoughts behind it, having been in education for so long?
Yeah, I think my mom was like, do it, go for it. She had retired right before the pandemic too. So she's also tutoring. She tutors just for herself though. So she also, I guess, was an influence in online tutoring too. But everyone, I mean, my family is incredibly supportive. And honestly, I think without that, I probably wouldn't have transitioned out because I knew that if, anything were to happen, I would have them. So that makes a huge difference. And not everyone's that fortunate, which is sad, a shame. So they were always supportive of the whole thing. My grandmothers didn't really have much to say at that point, but they alive and healthy, 99 and 97. So
Wow.
They were not 3 years ago. They were not, didn't have much to say about me leaving education. Mom, super supportive. Sister, beyond supportive. Yeah, my dad too. My husband as well.
So your sister did this a year prior to you,
yeah.
which is an awesome thing. I think siblings are a great help in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to life transitions in general. Were there any things that she had mentioned about, she was kind of spearheading this transitioning thing, going into something more private? And were there any things that stuck out to you that you can remember that she was kind of mentioning in the moment?
Our family is very hardworking, and like I would use the word tenacious. Like she was just like, you're gonna figure it out. You're gonna make it work. And I didn't really ever doubt that. But one of the things my sister says to this day is not to have a deficit mindset, she says, I definitely have a deficit mindset. Like I'm always worried about, the bottom line. And I make decisions sometimes that way. Like, and she always, that's kind of like her go-to. She's like, you need to just think about it in a different way. Yeah. And then and kind of like set the boundaries and the things that I want to have, and just that my, like, essentially my clients will fall into place. Everything will kind of work out. I guess more so if I believe it. I don't know.
For sure. That idea of growth mindset and just kind of, I guess, being optimistic about what is to come can be extremely difficult when you're starting off something like yourself, your sister, myself. It's at times there's loads of doubt that comes in. And yet again, you just have that base level of I'm going to figure this out no matter what. And again, that growth mindset that teachers teach their students is something so important, because it's like we have to fail in specific ways to be able to learn and evolve and be better. And it's clearly something that you have taken in stride for sure. So you started the Literacy Party back in 2022. And tell us about the Literacy Party in general. How many teachers do you have? Tell us kind of what you got going on right now.
So I started the Literacy Party as an Instagram account during the pandemic, just to kind of keep in touch with my kids. And it kind of evolved into reviewing books. I review books. I previously had reviewed books for like Harper and Scholastic, and then once I had left teaching, I think I had mentioned I started as a contractor in ed tech for a social emotional learning company, and kind of started to like do some instructional design work with them while building my tutoring company. I didn't have a name for my tutoring company right away. I was just kind of tutoring the students I previously had and was marketing tutoring for myself in roughly like mid-August 2022. I filled my schedule by the end of September. So in about a month, I had reached the number of hours that I wanted per week, and was like, okay, I'm like a real company at this point, like kind of. So I created an LLC, and I had been turning people away by end of September, which was just the beginning of the school year. And I was like, this is crazy. Like I was just, there has to be a way to like grow beyond myself. And I was apparently already needing to do that. So I got an LLC. I started by bringing on a few tutors that I had worked with in my previous 2 districts. And then I filled their schedules to, what they wanted. And then I currently have about 15 contractors that work for me. We do preschool through 8th grade. We have some high school students, but primarily pre-K through 8th, reading, writing, math, science, executive function type support, and mostly online. We do have some local families in person as well, in New Jersey. Yeah. And then I think we've been kind of like doing really well with that. My newest adventure are group classes. I have a kindergarten reading club that's pretty popular. And I think that's where I'm looking to explore the most in the next year. How can I have group classes for myself? Because what I do, I specialize pretty much in pre-K through 2 reading. So I do a lot of the same thing with a lot of kids. So I have the kindergarten reading club, 1st grade reading club. And then I also would like to explore doing some groups for my other tutors, doing like magazine club or, comprehension club, book clubs. So that's kind of the next goal.
I think that's really cool because, you mentioned in the classroom that, again, in elementary, you can't just lecture students. They're not taking notes as much. So you have to have this other piece that you can kind of form into the lesson, whether it's hands-on, whether it's more visuals, something like that. And it seems to be, especially with these magazine groups and these kindergarten reading groups and stuff, it seems to be something that you're implementing yet again, right, into a group setting, which is super cool. Now, these groups are most of them online, most of them in person.
So my goal is for them to mostly all be online. So my kindergarten reading club is my most popular at this point. It's maximum of 4 kids. It's just a half an hour. The goal is to really target like phonological awareness skills, which you don't need a ton of time doing. So to do that in person for such a short amount of time doesn't really seem like it would be worth it for families to come out or for our tutors to do. So it's kind of like this sweet spot of like, we get a lot done in a half an hour. It's social, it's fun. And then, it helps support the child's foundation and then we move on. So that's been really great. As far as like a magazine club, that would be probably older students writing their own magazine together or and a little bit more time. So yeah, that might look a little bit different, but I'm hoping to keep them all virtual.
Stephanie, for me, for a traveling teacher, a lot of parents in the beginning of when I started this, they were pretty hesitant with the online, right?
Mhm.
Obviously, the 2020 was to nobody's fault. It was kind of a nightmare for everybody involved in terms of the online teaching. And it was just extremely difficult and put on everybody immediately. And it was just sink or swim. You have to figure it out,
Yeah.
right? So
Mhm.
I understand parents' hesitation when it comes to the online, and something that, it's something that I feel as though when I started this out, and maybe for you as well, we questioned, is this going to be viable for the students? Is even this one-on-one or these group settings going to be something that the kids can do, and even in the younger ages? And for me, I have definitely found that it works. The kids are growing up, they're born with technology all around them. Have you had a lot of parents kind of questioning the online, and how does it work for them, and how do you go about kind of calming them when it comes to the online stuff?
Yeah, I think parents, they think, oh my gosh, 2020 pandemic, my child's in a class of 20 kids with one teacher, they're managing the raising the hand button and mute and it was a bit of a disaster at the time. So I just remind them that it's one-on-one, it's very different. We have every resource at our fingertips. It can be immediate support. I also sometimes parents on the fence, I might do a little bit of a trial lesson with their child. I do try to do my assessments in person if they're local. So I'll try to do an assessment in person so that I can meet the child face to the name, and then we kind of move towards virtual instruction. But I also, I send out online learning tip little document to all my parents before we get started. And I do say, it is not for everyone, but I have multiple 4.5-year-olds that I work with online. So I kind of say, if they can do it, your kid can do it too. And we might as well just try it.
That's the biggest thing, right? It's just, hey, try it with anything in life. Try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? It's not not every single type of education or style of teaching or learning is going to work for every single student. But as you're mentioning, and as I found as well, it just seems to be something that really clicks with these students. It's just kind of inherent in them at this point, and they really strive with it. I mean, it's so interesting how things evolve through certain types of adversities and whatnot, as we've mentioned before. And this one seems to be really good. And listen, for any teachers who are listening who are potentially thinking of doing something along the lines of tutoring or anything outside of the classroom, this is the online portion of these is very important in terms of your schedule, right? When I first started, I was doing a little bit of in person as well. And I noticed for the contracting teachers that I had, it made more sense for them to do it online, because you can log off from one and end the lesson and then immediately log on to the next. And you don't have to commute and all of these things. So economically speaking, it works. And again, the most important piece is what we just mentioned. Is it going to work for the kids? And for any teachers that are listening, the way that it's done with Stephanie, myself, and many other tutoring companies that are doing it online, it works. It works for the vast majority of the students. And so, don't let that be a hurdle for you in terms of, trying to start something like this online. It gives you extra reach. It gives you the ability to spread out a lot more, and it gives you this autonomy over your schedule and over your life. So
I think with one of the things with my little ones, like the frequency is so important. I know when you teach older students and maybe, they're cramming for a test or, they meet for an hour, which not a lot of my little ones can. And then, they don't see you for a whole week. Right. So the frequency is so important with little ones. And I think probably that's where people are more hesitant with the little kids to do online. But, that's what I say to parents. Frequency is so important. It's short, it's sweet. And then we move on and then they get another dose of it. Most of my kids I see 2 to 3 times a week for short periods. So that, someone who's potentially thinking about this, that's really helpful. And I think that's, parents also can't drive their kid to a tutor necessarily 2 times a week or, fit it in with all the other extracurriculars that kids are involved in. So that has been beneficial as well.
for sure. And for any parents that may be listening as well, I mean, this is what I'm sure both of us have noticed is that if there is an initial hesitation, the schedule piece of it is enormous once they realize like, wow, I can have my kid at the dining room table doing the reading instruction with Stephanie, and I could be cooking dinner or I could be doing something else that already needs to be done anyways. And it really takes a huge load off of parents' shoulders when it comes to, when they start to see the value in it.
I say if kids can watch television, they can learn with me online. So
for sure. And I agree with the half-hour sessions for the elementary kids, right? It's really important to end things on a high note, not burn them out too much. And I think that frequency piece that you're mentioning is also extremely important because once a week can help. It'll definitely work for a lot of students, but that frequency, as you know best in terms of the elementary, it is definitely something that is extremely important to the students maintaining their level of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you'd like to add about the Literacy Party? Let's talk about anything you'd like to add about the teaching aspect, let's start with that. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about the teaching aspect of what it is that you're doing with your business?
So I think one thing that our company does, we do assessments in the beginning of all of our children so that we can share growth and progress so that our sessions can be tailored and differentiated to each child. We are not really the homework helping tutoring company. Do we help with homework? Absolutely. Do we help study for tests? Yes. But we really try to support children with whatever their deficits may be. We're like prepared and ready to teach every single time something very specific per child. So there's definitely other companies that are more of a homework helping type company. That's kind of not us. I don't know. We pull on all of the best modes of teaching and using the best curriculums. We don't have one set curriculum. We do use a lot of the same. Like we use a lot of foundations, a lot of like a structured literacy approach, and but we kind of know what we've used, what works best to teach different things, and kind of use all of those to get the desired results. Not just like a one. I don't know, one. We don't use one curriculum. We don't have our own curriculum. It's kind of just a bunch of resources that we know that work best.
Because one size fits all, as we know, just doesn't work, right? We need to be able to gather all the different materials that we may have in front of us and use them exactly in the way that will benefit each and every student. And for parents listening, it's very important to find tutoring services that specialize in what it is that you're looking for. There's a lot of you can go to a lot of the bigger online companies that just have anybody coming in to tutor, which is fine and it works. And a lot of the time it's a lot cheaper. But at the same time, the quality of instruction can be hurt a lot by that. And so really kind of finding companies like the Literacy Party that niche down into specific specialties to be able to know like, hey, this is our thing. We can help a little bit with these other pieces, but like if you're looking for what it is that we do here, then this is definitely the place to go. And for any teachers that are looking to start up anything like this as well, it's really important in general to niche down. It's there are so many students in need of assistance across the board. And that's why, I have a lot of other tutoring companies on this podcast, and it doesn't scare me at all because there's so many kids, and the passion that all of these edupreneurs like yourself and myself bring to the table. The most important piece is getting those kids what they need, getting those supplemental services that they need in order to move forward and be confident and build themselves as humans is something that's so important. And so again, don't be afraid to niche down into whatever it is that you want to do specifically, right? It's something that will let you stand out to the parents that are looking around for specific things that they have. And it's just something that, that it just works. Don't be afraid of not getting enough students, because especially nowadays, it's something that
you're not going to be for everybody. And I think that goes back to my deficit mindset my sister told me not to have. As soon as I was not for everybody is when my business has, seen an upswing. Like you can't be for everybody. So
you cannot be for everybody. And also, do you feel as though niching down into the specific piece helped your passion out for the teaching a lot as well?
You mean as when I was in the classroom, or like,
I mean now, because think about it as if we were to try to spread ourselves paper thin with anything in life, right? But let's talk about our companies in general. If we were to try to spread to cover every possible option and all of these things, it actually tends to burn us out a little bit. There's too many moving parts. And so niching down into something can actually increase that passion a lot more. Would you agree?
Yeah. I started as K-5 elementary only, and then I started to expand up and have found that it was more difficult to do that. And then so like I brought on some science tutors, they're wonderful. But I'm finding that our bread and butter is K-5. So, we will have a lot of students that will continue to be supported by our tutors, like throughout, their career in elementary, middle, and high school. But, really what bread and butter is elementary. So,
and for those students who are moving into middle school and maybe even going all the way up to high school, I feel as though if they have had such a connection with you or any of your teachers, that connection piece is also super, super important, right? The idea of niching down into a specific specialty and a specific age group, and then having the ones that want to stay with you as they move forward is fine, right? It's something that is definitely there. And again, those significant connections that you form, those long-term relationships that you form with the families and the students is also super important, right? So I totally agree with everything you said. Is there anything that you would like to add? We talked about anything you'd like to add about the teaching portion. One thing I wanted to ask you, I notice on Instagram, there's a lot of different books and things. Do you create any of those books that you have up there, or are those things that you have just found that have been helpful?
Trying to think what you mean, but on Instagram, like in my stories or things that I posted, or
I believe, if I remember correctly, and I may be wrong about this, I remembered some kind of books, but it may have simply just been from the website books that you had up kind of as a
I do make a ton of my own resources. Maybe that's what you mean. I also have a Teachers Pay Teacher store, which I know a lot of teachers do. I create a lot of my resources, and I do throw it up on Teachers Pay Teachers. Like, I use a lot of decodable readers with my kids, and I've created a ton on my own that I throw up there. I definitely don't make everything, but yeah.
How has Teachers Pay Teachers been for you? Did you start this back when you were actually teaching in the classroom as well, or this was something you started? Yeah, talk to us a little bit about that as sort of a side
Teachers Pay
hustle.
Teachers has been incredible for me. It was impossible for me to do as a classroom teacher. It was way too much work in addition to teaching as a classroom teacher. So when I moved positions in schools, I vowed to not purchase anything on Teachers Pay Teachers, which I did all the time as a classroom teacher because you don't have the time to make all of these incredible things. So I was like, you know what? I'm not going to buy one thing. I'm going to create everything. And then I'm going to put it on Teachers Pay Teachers. I did very well my first year. I had a resource that could say went viral. And I never looked back. Once I like got a taste of that, I was like, I'm hooked. So, yeah, I started my store probably in, like 2019, over the summer because I had time. And then, like I said, I had a November resource that just like went viral. I had made like $5 a month, and then I just was like, yep, this is it. And then I try to get a couple of resources out every month. It is hard to keep that up. And I'm tutoring about 20-ish hours a week. So at some point, I'd like to maybe tutor less, make more Teachers Pay Teachers resources. I also give all my resources to my tutors too, which is really helpful for them. So I have a drive that we share so that's nice. Yeah. What else? I don't know. I love Teachers Pay Teachers. I don't know if you have any specific questions about that other than.
I mean, I think it really points back to your passion that you talked about at the beginning of this podcast, where you like the arts and crafts, you like the creative piece of these things. And it's something that a lot of teachers talk about as well. I mean, elementary and middle school, and obviously high school as well. But the amount of creativity that goes into the materials that you have is so important for the kids to be able to kind of engage with them, right? And so you making these things, and I also respect you really making it like, yes, when you were a classroom teacher, you really don't have the time. You are purchasing materials, and that's totally normal and fine. But actually saying to yourself, hey, now that I'm in this new role, I'm going to make it a goal not to buy anything, and I'm going to try to make everything on my own. And it's another thing that kind of brings you in. It brings you an outlet for your creativity, but it also brings you in some income as well. So I think it's a really cool addition to what you have going on. And yeah, I mean, in terms of the literacy party, you mentioned you would like to maybe lessen the amount of tutoring that you do, and then keep just continually hiring more teachers and whatnot. And that's the goal for any tutoring company. Are you finding that you are enjoying the business aspect of the company a lot? Is it something that, what do you think about the business side of things?
So it is a lot, that is for sure. I think it's a lot to be tutoring 20 hours and managing roughly 20 students and then managing 15 contractors. I was doing all of my like business related tasks on Fridays. But now and like fielding like consultation calls with families all through the week. I, thought there'd be a point maybe sooner than it has happened to happen where I would lessen my tutoring and increase my management. I'm not there yet. I also, it's the middle of a school year. So yeah, it's a lot of work. Tutoring for yourself is one thing. Having a tutoring company is another. And yeah, I tried to do it all at one time.
Yeah.
which we're going well, but still it's a lot of work. I just hired a virtual assistant to manage some of my business logistics. So
nice. Yeah, super helpful. It's a huge learning curve, like you said, going from tutoring for yourself to having a company. And for anybody listening, it's super important to understand which one of those you fall into. I talked to a lot of different tutoring companies who, they say like, I just kind of want to go back to tutoring for myself. And it's either way is totally fine. There's no right or wrong in that sense, but really kind of dig deep, whoever's listening, and just kind of think to yourself like, well, do I want to manage people, or do I want to just kind of run this myself? It's an interesting ride either way, for sure. How has this transition helped your relationships with the people around you, and more importantly, yourself?
It has changed my life. like my happiness, my stress level. It is not not stressful, that's for sure. It's stressful to be working for yourself. And, when you're in a school, yes, it's a lot of work and it's very stressful, but it's predictable. Like every 2 weeks, you got your paycheck. And every 2 weeks, I'm making different numbers for the most part, which is fine. But overall, working for myself has been unbelievable. I have the flexibility that I've always wanted. I can travel when I want, which I know is very important to you. I make my own schedule. I can walk my dog in the middle of the day multiple times. I would say I'm a hard worker by nature, and I always worked very hard for other people, but it's different working hard for yourself. It's much more rewarding. Yeah. And I love every minute of it. It's it's rewarding. You have so much ownership over it. I don't think I could ever go back to working for someone else at this point.
For sure. The autonomy of your life is something that when you actually make this leap, it's just something that is so freeing. Having been in any job for, a typical 9 to 5 or a 7 to 3 or something like that, and working for somebody else, when you gain that autonomy again, the level of freedom that you feel and have, it really, again, it's not easy, right? Starting these companies it's very difficult. You really have to learn a lot of different things. But the thing with teaching is that you already kind of gather those instincts and those experiences within the classroom and within all of that, right? It's not just teaching. It's all the different kinds of things, the admin work and all the different things that you have to do on top of that, right? So yeah, absolutely. Stephanie, is there anything that you'd like to add that I did not ask you? Anything that is kind of on the top of your mind that you would have wanted to say that I maybe did not ask?
I think the only thing that I'd want to add is that anyone can get out of education if that's their goal. It's not easy, but you can do it. That again, I love nothing more than helping other teachers. So if people, want to reach out, if they have questions, I'm more than happy to jump on a call, or you can just DM me anything. Because I know that, and I think I didn't really necessarily touch on this, but just I am happier than I've ever been. So, and that, even like you said, how the relationships you have with other people, like again, just to be the happiest person you've ever been, that affects every relationship you have with everyone around you. So I know that teaching can be tough. I get to do the best part of the job and nothing else. So if people are looking for something else and it happens to be tutoring, that, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to chat.
For sure. And I totally agree with that. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning, you were a significant piece of where I'm at right now. And so, anybody listening, Stephanie is truly a very good resource for anything like this. And it's something that you will find as you make this transition. It's something that you will find about this community of what I like to call edupreneurs, is that everybody is happy to help. There's really no secrets. Everybody is like, no, I do this, I do that. These are mistakes that I made that maybe you can kind of stray away from. It is a very open community of people who are ready to help for whatever questions you may have. So, like I said at the beginning, if you are somebody who is looking to maybe transition out of the classroom, go to these Facebook groups, go and just ask random questions, ask anything that comes to your mind. And it is fascinating how many people come through and comment on them. So yeah, Stephanie, I totally agree with you. It's the happiest I've ever been as well. And it's well worth the stress and the effort to get it to where it is and to continue growing it, because you get your life back in a way that for myself wasn't even fathomable at the time. Right. So, Stephanie, where can people find you?
So, my Instagram handle is at the Literacy Party. My website is www.theliteracyparty.com. My email is hello@theliteracyparty.com. And I think That's all my contacts.
I think that covers it all. Stephanie, thank you again so much for everything in the past and for being on this podcast. It is really nice to have kept in touch and see how
Yes,
the literacy party has grown. And, thanks again for being a guest on here. And I
of
look forward to
course.
speaking with you soon.
Yes, you as well.
Have a great day, everybody.